Okay, I think we're alive. Wow, that was a crazy set by Bill. I'm speechless. So we're just gonna sit here for the next hour and meditate. Okay. Thanks to Further In, and thanks to Thorsten for getting this whole thing together and getting me involved. Today I want to give you a bit of a run through and keep with the theme of my live performance max patches. So we're going to take a look at those and dig into the back end of those, see what makes them tick, and take a look at some of the fun stuff, like some of the algorithmic stuff, some of the probability stuff, and have a bit of fun. So first off, there's a couple of things I should say. One of the things with Max is there's all sorts of settings, the default settings. The default settings for very tight audio time, and this is something that I kind of wanted to touch on in a live stream I did a month ago. You want to have the scheduler in overdrive, and you want audio interrupt on. So if you can see my settings here, my sampling rate's 44, 100, vector size of 256, and signal vector size of 64. Now, if I wasn't doing a stream, I would probably change the vector size to 128, and I'd probably have the signal vector size at 32. But you always want to have scheduler in overdrive and audio interrupt on for really tight timing. So now that we've got that out of the way, well, actually no, let's add this bit. I want to show you this website. It's called Advanced Max Learning and Threading. It's an article by my friend Tim Place. It's on the Cycling74 website, but this stuff is so important for getting super tight timing in Max, and understanding threading and your kind of event scheduler and your audio scheduler is really important. The reason I highlight this article is because Tim actually this is not in the Max distribution. This is a separate download. It's called Thread Check, and it's this little device that Tim made. Let me just pull it up. Actually, it's over here in Dispatcher. You can see it right here. It's called Min Thread Check. And it basically, you put it in there and you have an output from any of your patch codes. So let's just go ahead and, you can even just put a bang signal here. And it's telling me that's in the main thread. If I was to turn audio on, and if I was to turn audio on and have a different setting, you might see these other ones line up. But anyway, I'm going to leave that there because that's kind of getting into the more kind of nerdy side of Max. And Tim does a much better job at explaining this in this video here on the cycling website. So just look up Advanced Max Learning About Threading. It'll really help you get your patches super tight. So, alright, well, let's take a look at this patch. This is a patch that I started developing maybe like halfway through last year with the intent of performing, and unfortunately it's not seen the light of day yet, and we all know the reason why. But it's a pretty fun patch, and it was coming along quite nicely. Let's just have a quick listen to it. So just turn it on. Now, sequencing wise, there's not a lot of interesting stuff going on here right now. It's just a just over here, we've got this metro section, and it's just randomly playing back a sample. But where it gets interesting here is a few things. There's 24 possibilities, or 24 copies of the same sample that can play at any one time. So if we head over here to, let's turn that one off. Now this is something that's sometimes a little difficult to do in Max, is to have a kind of like rapid retriggering of a sample without the audio degrading or without it skipping or things like that. You have to put a bit of work into the programming. So got this kind of hi-hat going on here. But where it gets interesting is this kind of ability to go into audio rate. So you get into that classic Mark Fell style sound, multi-stability. And the other element of this patcher that makes it interesting is there's 24 copies of any one sample if you need it. And you can control, I believe it will be available to see later, you can control the direction that the sample is played back, each individually, and you can control the time stretching. So if I go back and just randomly play some of these, then I'm just going to pitch them, or the speed. Now there's also a time stretching. Now over here in this section here, I'm controlling the envelope for all samples at any one time. And then because the rapid refire setup inside of the Poly voice controller is set in such a way, you can even handle kind of rapid retriggering via a separate metro like this. And it could just sit here all day. Max can handle it, won't crash, because it kind of set up this whole Poly voice section in a way that could handle it. Okay, so we've got time stretching. We can change the amounts. We can change the type of time stretching. Yeah, commenting, I think my friend Gregory Taylor says commenting is like a love letter to yourself in the future. Yeah, it definitely helps. So let's dig into this. What makes this patch special is that we have the ability to bring in samples. This is the sample loader here. So here's my kits. Yeah, there's one there just with Richard Devine kicks in it, just for fun. But yeah, you can bring in any of these kits, and I can load them up. So I select a kit. I load the folder, and you'll see this section down here that will change when I load it. Okay, so now these are being given an index of 1 to 5. And then over here, the Poly voice player basically just takes either 1 to 6 or 1 to 5. It sends in a note number, but that note number is just 1 through to 5. Then inside of Poly is where the kind of heavy lifting is really done in this whole patcher. So let's take a look at what's going on. So you'll know this envelope section from over here, this attack, decay, gain, release. I'm running it into an MC object just for simplicity's sake, just so I have less patch cables and the likes. But basically it's like my attack, decay, gain, and release are just audio signals that are giving me the values of those in milliseconds. That's running to the MC send, and that's coming into all copies of my voices within Poly. That's then setting the envelope here in this section, and it's setting an ADSR level. So I can actually, like, if I go back here and turn this back on, you'll hear that I can shape this sample, so I can cut it right off. I can also add an attack to the sample. So that's kind of what makes that little bit of patching kind of useful. Now in the voice, there's a number of stuff going on here because it's not a typical. It's using Poly to basically make multiple copies of the same sample and fire them back, in a very rapid manner, without cutting off the previous playing sample. So there's a bit of coding here, and it took me a minute to get this right. I actually had, thankfully, a really good tester who came to me with an idea for a sampler, and I was like, well, actually, I already have that kind of on the way. Do you wanna check it out? And that's Sebastian Kamens, who's quite well known in the live coding arena. Sebastian also uses Max. I think he uses Max with title cycles to play live. And he's been actually a really great tester for this patch for me, and provided me with some pretty good feedback. So basically in this inlet up here, my note number is coming in, and the way that event ordering works in Max, it works from right to left, bottom to top. And then it's coming in here, the note number's going, let's unlock it. It's coming in here. It's going to this trigger bang I, or trigger bang integer, and that index then heads out this outlet, and then it heads into these two patch cords here. It's doing two important things. It's setting a sprintf object here, which is setting the sample that we would like to play back in this groove object. Groove is an object in Max that is for sample playback and manipulation, perhaps the most popular. We're using it in this context because Groove has time stretching, which allows us to kind of take the samples and elongate and stretch them, or make them shorter and pitch them in strange ways. So the sprint-off is going to here. It's setting the sample we would like to play back in the groove here. And it's also going into this info, which is giving us the length of the sample. That's then going back up to here. And then depending on this second inlet, whether we're actually have the speed set in minus or in plus, it's then deciding what the final pitch for the groove will be, what the final signal driving the groove will be. It'll either be minus, which means the sample runs in reverse, or it runs in forward for a positive number. And this is kind of cool because it took me a minute to get this right. It took a bit of patching here and trial and error. And I'm quite happy with how it runs. There's not really too much I would change with this right now. But and then over here, the all-important voice handling. So we get a trigger when that note number comes into poly, which fires off our envelope, our ADSR. So we get a 1, fires off the ADSR, and that then tells the poly voice handler that this voice is no longer available. Then over here on the groove, we have a phaser outlet that is basically like a loop sync output, and depending on what the object here has been set, whether it's a 0 or a 1, as in it's either going in forward or reverse, depends on when we will get the edge detection. For when we'll get an edge detection whether the sample plays forward or in reverse, and when we get that edge detection, we'll get a bang, and that turns off or tells ADSR to move into the release phase. When the release phase finishes, poly voice handler will then say that this voice is available, you can play a sample here again. And then there's one other little part here, just because I was kind of getting some glitchy cutoffs of samples that were extending over a length of time, and I realized that I needed to tie it in closer with the ADSR. And if I'm to be honest, this may be the section I'm not completely certain is correct, but it works. And well, if it works in Max and it works for you and you've belted the hell out of it and it still works, then it might be the right way. And basically what's going into here is it's stopping a glitch happening, but it's also doing something back here, because we actually got a gate, and depending on whether it's what indexed sample, whether it's playing, say the kick on 1, the snare on 2, the hat on 3, it sends out all the kicks out of 1 for the index, all the snares out of 2. And that allows us, once it comes out of the poly, to split it up like this and have the ability to mix that live. Because, typically what would happen in poly is all your voices would end up being summed, and then you have no control over, I want to pull the kick out, or the only way to pull it out is to remove the sample from your buffer. So let me just fire this up. I want to show the sequencer now, and this is kind of built, this is kind of the engine, and this demo here was more for just testing this section here. You might see this R num, so it's receiving, and these are numbers. So let's show the sequencer. So this actually is this sequencer is one that I've used live in the past. I don't remember, maybe like start of last year I built it or something. But let's just play it. It's cool because it ties in with the monome. So I built it so that I could have both a generative pattern maker, but also one that I could physically change on the fly. So I'm just going to fire it up, and if I show, you'll see it, and I can just like put in some, what's going on? Huh. Did my monome go to sleep? Let's see. I don't know. And I can go ahead and, yeah, something's going on. Yeah, it's kind of cool, and it's funny because there's something about, and this is a classic William Fields move, is to decouple the interface from the audio engine. So maybe, yeah, I was probably inspired by that. So that's the sequencer engine. So let's pull the volume down a little bit. We'll leave this sample playback section here. You understand that's vital to this patcher. And let's dig into the back end of this. So I'll just show you the UI for a minute. It also has a sample playback section, but I've got that turned down right now. But I just want to explain the sequencer. They're Euclidean based, and there's a few options here. You can set how many hits you want per bar. You can set the rhythm, offset and rotation, and you can also specify the length of the bar. And then over here, let me see if I can zoom in a little more. So we can set all that for each of the 6 sequencing chains. We can get a new random selection. And this is based on probability as well. And then over here, we have this section here. And this probability section is two functions. One, it can be manually set. You can think of 1 here as 100%, and 0 would be 0. 0 would be no, you won't get any hits. So it's kind of like the retrig option on Electron, I guess, or something like that. But 100 means at each of these points you get a hit. Let's just clear this off for demonstration purposes. Okay, we can hear the kick. And now if I bring this down, it'll start skipping some of the steps. Yeah, like the chance. You know where you can set it by percentage. That's totally it. Now this other option here is because, you know, sometimes it's nice to keep the kick, you know, steady and randomize some of the other hits. Let's get back over here. What's going on? Make it a little easier to hear. Let's make this 1 and 1. Well, let's get some random values for these other. Now I love these toggles here. Basically it starts randomly selecting and morphing between different percentages. So I'll turn them all on except for the kick. Yeah, it's lots of fun. You can kind of dig into this for ages. And it's also this next option where at the end of each bar I can have it select a whole new set of patterns. And that can be tuned as much as you like. Alright, so let's just have a quick look at how and why that works. Let's just turn the audio down. So you can see it kind of laid out here. Now basically this is the section up here that randomizes everything. And I'm just going to turn the auto randomization off. And it's based on Fibonacci numbers, my patterning. So I have a table, and this table could be filled with any values. You know, you don't have to use Fibonacci. You could use Pascal. You could use anything. You could use traditional, you know, 4/4 measures that the new sequence would pull from. And basically, I'm sending in a random number up here, and it's selecting how many numbers of, or how many hits we want on each bar. Bar length is set to 16. We can increase that to as much as we like, and we can offset it as well. And that's basically it. It's super simple. Rather than using you know, an expert or something to generate the Fibonacci numbers, which is totally possible, and would be another way to do it, I just drew them into a table and actually just duplicated the table. The Euclidean section looks like this. Let's pull that up nice and big. Let's pull that up nice and big so everyone can have a look. This is there's of course a number of ways to create Euclidean sequences. I wanted to kind of set out to do it without just going ahead and using an expression or something. I wanted to lay it out in a more traditional max patching way. So if you remember, this is our step number here. This is how many hits we want per bar. This is our offset and rotation, and this is our specify the length of the bar. And then basically, you know, it's coming in here, and depending on whether it's high or low, it's passing through a select object here out for a trigger. And then on the right side here, this is where, depending on what these settings are here, we're creating a list using these objects. So the Uzi bangs out how many copies we want of a hit. The offset and rotation is set here. The length of the bar is set here. So that tells us how many times we need to give, how many hits we need to add here. And then they're all grouped up, and when we hit the maximum of the maximum length of the bar, it then gets banged out here, out of the group. But anyway, go ahead, screen cap this, patch it up, and have some fun. Now, the other thing in this patcher, the other part that makes this one kind of fun is this section, which we can zoom right into. This is the probability section for playing back each of the steps. And it looks like this. Basically, our hits, all of our hits set for each step are passing through here. And if it's in favor, you know, as in it's 100%, it will pass straight out of the gamble, and then basically the trigger basically goes straight through this subpatcher and then out to an integer, and then over into here, and then this is our snum that's going over to the our send object that's going over to the other patch, the playback engine. So let's look at the gamble section. Remember, this 1, 0 is more I think it's probably easier to think about it as a 0 or 100%. So 1 is 100% chance it will play, and then that gets less. So if we play these odds, have a look at this. This is basically, whoa. So our trigger is coming in. It's setting a random value of, what is that, 1,000,000? What did I set there? And then in this right-hand section, we're setting the probability of success, or the probability of the value going. And basically, this is a less than or greater than object. It's a less than object. And if the random value here is less than this value, then we're going to get a bang, or a positive number. If it's not, it's going to be 0. So the way that this section here works, so that, remember, this is 2 parts. This is actually just handling the percentage. This is the gamble subpatcher. And this is actually, I should say, this is a piece inspired by Chris Dobrian. If you're interested in, Chris Dobrian has a great website called, or a blog that he kept when he was doing his PhD years ago, called, I think it's Algorithmic Composition. And it's a really great spot for inspiration and little tidbits of great max patching. And this is inspired by Chris. So that's the gamble section. We set the percentage here, and then here is basically where we're counting between randomly generated values. And the main thing that's doing that is this piece of patching right here, which is kind of a lot to create a randomly generated number. But what it does, and the reason there's so much code here, yeah, that's the one. Thanks, Cyborg. And the reason there's so many objects in this section is because what I wanted it to do is, I don't want it to select, have a line draw to a random value and then select the next line to draw to and just cut to that next one. So what it actually does is it kind of remembers its last position where it finished, and then it randomly morphs to the next one, or it morphs to the next randomly generated number. So let's turn it on. And you'll notice that it never kind of cuts abruptly to a new number. And that will, it creates a new number every 10 seconds. It's probably a combo of this and the Fibonacci Euclidean number sequencer that really make this kind of a dynamic and interesting patch to play. So it's part ways generative, and in some other sense you can still kind of interact with it because you have like a visual controller where you can actually turn off a specific step if you're like, well, I like what it generated, but I don't like that particular section. So it's a very playable patch, and it tends to be what I build. I don't want to get too close to just pressing play and letting the computer do all of its thing. And I'm probably not as rock and roll as others where I'm just like, well, let's build a max patch from the beginning. So I guess they have some fail safes and the likes. But this makes it fun. It makes that ability to come up with unexpected moments. And because I have this control, I can, stop it and go back to a certain value that I thought sounded good, and kind of just move and evolve from there. That's probably the guts of this one. I think it's pretty fun. Let's just turn it back on again. Yeah, that side is great. Chris is like old school Max guy, and he really drops some really good nuggets of algorithmic approaches with MaxMSP. I've learned a lot from that guy. Alright. So, let's have a look at another patch. Got another 20 minutes. See how far we can go. Let's have a look at this one. Let's play this part first. Now, this is a patch I made to play at the start of last year down in Melbourne, Australia. My home country. And this is I wouldn't normally give someone a patch like this, and nor would I normally do a presentation like this, but I wanted to show this patch for a particular reason. It was an idea inspired by Mark Fell and finding an essay of Mark's, and this was before the Algorithmic Art Assembly last year, where I finally actually got to meet Mark. But Mark's, I've long been a fan of Mark's, and there's this fantastic essay of his that's been floating around online. It's available online. It's called Works in Sound Pattern Synthesis, and it's Mark's thesis for his degree of Doctor of Philosophy from the University of Surrey. And in it is some really inspiring stuff. I believe that this is the same essay that is in the Oxford Handbook of Algorithmic Music. This might be the longer version that's online. But if you just look up Mark Fell Thesis on Google, I think it's literally the first. It's literally the first thing that pops up. And there is this section where he talks even specifically about some of his approaches in Max to creating a couple of his albums. He doesn't give away the Max patches. He doesn't give away insights how he actually built them, but it was inspiring, and I thought, let's see what I can make when inspired by this, because I'm kind of that kid who would take the radio apart because I was more interested in how it worked than what came out of it. And so that's kind of where I got to with this patcher. And the reason it's kind of so crazy looking here is this was the version that I played down in Melbourne, and it looks pretty crazy. You wouldn't want to look at this when you're playing live, and the reality is that I don't look at that. I use Mirror. This is Max's an app that you can just buy out. It's like $10 I think on the App Store. Cycling makes it. I love it because you build the UI, and you don't have to build anything on the app. You just open it up, and so you'll see that I've got 2 tabs with 2 views that allow me to just manually change different things. And it's literally like you're just there and you kind of like, I guess you look like one of those guys at a live show that has the iPad and he's mixing, except you're on stage. Um, but I have other stuff to do, like make the visuals. But yeah, I mean this is actually the patch that I played down in Melbourne for part of the set. So I'm gonna close this one, and let's hear a slightly more newer version, and you can tell me if it sounds a bit like Mark or not. I think I got somewhere in the ballpark, but also wanting to make it my own. Mark generously shared those insights into his Max patch, and I feel like he would certainly have no qualms with people being inspired by it. Actually, let's fire this up. Let's restart that patch. Do. So let's take a look at, let me see, let's take a look at, what makes this tick. This is the main section here. I mean, this is where all the sequencing is happening. And you've got two things going on here. You've got And I should say, I never even asked Mark about this, and I had the opportunity to, but I wanted to go about it in what I thought was his kickoff of inspiration and do it in my own way. I've never even seen a Mark Fell patch, I have to be honest. So this section here sets the length of the step. And then this section here sets how many triggers, how many hits we get on each of those steps. So if I get down here somewhere low, let's do this. Each of these steps, you can maybe see a little bit of green here. Let's set it to 5. Say that this is, 5 milliseconds per step. And if I set this to 1, we'll just get 1 hit for each of those steps. And then I can So you get the idea. It's kind of like a, set how long each step's going to stay there, and then set how many triggers we want. And it took a little minute to work this out for it to be kind of like to reliably happen. And that was all about event ordering and the likes. And that's in this section here, seek and trigger system. This is what the live patch system looks like. So zoom in here a little bit. It basically, in this patch code number 1, we get our time, and then in this one, we get how many triggers. This body object's super awesome. It allows you to synchronize incoming messages. So perhaps messages are coming in at different times, but you want them to be synchronized downstream. It allows you to synchronize them up, unpacking them into a list. The list is going to this trigger bang object here. And let me just pull this one over that I fleshed out more to make it a little simpler. But yeah, our list comes down. So again, length is length of time, how many triggers we want, goes into a pack object to make it a list, goes into a trigger bang to split it out. We want the list to go first, followed by the bang. The list goes into here, it gets unpacked again, and then this value goes into here, which is going to be how many triggers we want, and then this is 1,000. So in this example, we have a length of time of 1,000. We want, which is a second. We want 20 hits of our sample inside of that 1 second. And then that gets divided. So 1,000 divided by 20 is 50. So it means that inside of that 1 second, there needs to be a hit every 50 milliseconds. And then over here, our Uzi gets a bang. The number it's gotten, how many triggers we want here, 20. So it's going to send out 20 bangs in succession. It's going to send 20 into here. So 20 divided by 50 is 1,000. And then we're going to bang this, and then we have our body object again to sync up the bang with 1,000. Now what this is doing is then setting 1,000 here. So this section basically just calculates how to get 20 triggers, or the calculation for 20 triggers inside of the length of time. We're then syncing it up again, and then we're setting the delay per trigger, or the total delay amount for the pipe, total delay amount for the trigger. And then we're sending it out to here. And for this example, for a simple example, we're going into a trigger object and then a sample here. So let me just give some example here. Let's set it to two triggers up the top here, and then 1,000. And we get 2 hits inside of a second. If I bring the time down, we're going to get 2 hits inside of half a second. And I can keep going down. 1/25th of a second, 2 hits. Okay, so let's go back to half a second, and then let's increase this to, like, we want 50 triggers inside half a second. So now you can kind of hear how this section here is working. And then this is happening per step. So we're going to get 500 triggers in half a second. I really love this because I think it creates and has the ability to create complex sounding results and kind of interesting and strange and exploratory, but the real guts of this patch are pretty simple. And then you can, clearly can have a lot of fun with it over here. I'm just thinking, is there, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for this patch. I think that's the most interesting thing in this patch, is how this section here works. This patch is ready for its 5,000 mile service, and I realized I need to go in and switch all of these out for the sampler section I built at the start of this year and showed you at the beginning of this stream. It will actually make this sound better, I think. So I'm going to go in and switch all of these sections out for that. There's this one other section here where I'm creating a hit at the start of each sequence. So this is our sequence of 8 steps, and that's triggering this playback mechanism up here. I can simulate it, put in a bang here. Each time it gets a bang, it plays. So let's, just so you can see it and hear it. Now this is using the live.step object, which it's interesting because I feel like I see a lot of Max users overlook it, perhaps because it has that Ableton Live look, but it's incredibly powerful. The reason it's powerful is because it has a whole lot of messages that you can send to it to do all sorts of stuff, and I mean it's your only piano roll inside of Max. Well, grid-based piano roll, unless you build it yourself. But I love all of these settings, and it makes it really great for live performance because you can go backwards and forwards. All of the trickies, rotate and random. And then also it has these, and these are classic settings that you see in the old Max for Live buffer shuffler. It has these settings up here, like do nothing, down. You can make it go down, up, left. You can rotate your pattern left and right, and you can randomize your pattern. Super atonal. I also added this kind of section here where at the end of at the end of the sequence, no matter how long the sequence is, it'll give me whatever value or whatever message I've set here. It'll complete it on the sequence. So I can set it to randomize at the end of each. And scramble. Scramble's cool because it's kind of like random, but it'll scramble between the notes or the notes that you have already set. And that's pretty much my time. So keep an eye out. The rest of next week I'll pull bits and pieces out of some of these patches and make little examples and put them up on Twitter and whatever for people to dig into. But by all means, if you've got the patience, go in and rebuild some of this stuff if you like. It's super fun and really easy to get down into a wormhole, that's for sure. But that's where the stuff is fun, in wormholes, right? So thanks for having me, and thanks for sticking around. Awesome performance from Bill, and stick around and check out Trash Panda.